Jackson, who's now been released. But we start with the former #2 overall pick who has made his way to his new home. Wentz arriving in Indianapolis today, just about 24 hours after the team worked out a trade to acquire him from the Eagles. He reunites with head coach Frank Reich, who was the Eagles' offensive coordinator when Wentz was playing at an MVP level earlier in his career. And his new teammates rolling out the red carpet digitally, of course. Wideout Paris Campbell says, "Yes, sir. Welcome to the family, bro." Running back Jonathan Taylor with a welcome home message for his new backfield mate. And Darius Leonard, who made it clear he was not going to tolerate players joining this team and not giving 100% earlier in the offseason, saying, "Let's get to work." Welcome to Indy. Can't wait to see what the future holds in the 3-1-7. Let's break this one down now with two of your favorites from Good Morning Football Weekend. DeAngelo Hall, Mike Garafolo. D. Hall, we'll start with you. I think everybody's presuming that because Carson Wentz is reunited with Frank Reich, that he's going to return to form, back to that MVP caliber type of play. Will he, in all actuality?
Well, you know what? That's the tough question, because Carson Wentz has all the ability in the world. I played against this kid actually in that 2017 season where he was lighting everything up. But when you watch Carson Wentz as of late, he just doesn't quite look like mentally he still can handle being a quarterback. And then you think about the competition level with Jalen Hurts, in Philadelphia. I'm hearing rumors that from the day they drafted him, Carson Wentz just wasn't right. And so mentally, I think Carson needs to get that dog mentality. It doesn't matter what offense you put Carson Wentz in. This offense is not going to ask him to do a whole lot. So maybe he doesn't need to be the focal point. And so with a strong running game, a great defense, can this Indianapolis Colts offense be great? Can this team be great? Absolutely, with Carson Wentz. But I think only time will tell mentally, can Carson Wentz kind of get out of his own way and be a locker room leader in that clubhouse for those guys.
Listen, D. Hall, I think that there are myriad reasons why Carson Wentz has not played great of late. And I think one of them is a lack of confidence and a lack of good vibes. And he's going to get that in Indianapolis. He's going to get that from Frank Reich and also Mike Groh and Press Taylor, guys that he had as coaches in Philadelphia who are in Indianapolis. But he's also going to get it. Roll those tweets again if we want to. I mean, all those good vibes from teammates who have been sitting there saying, boy, we've got a great team. Well, all we need is a franchise quarterback, a long-term quarterback. And they loved Phillip Rivers, but they knew Phillip Rivers wasn't going to be around for very long. Well, this guy in Carson Wentz, he could be. So he's going to go from a situation in which he heard, well, who were the guys in the locker room who are Jalen Hurts guys? And there were also some reports about how Wentz wasn't a good teammate and he wasn't coachable. Well, now he's going to get the welcome mat rolled out for him. Yeah, they've done it virtually so far, but they're going to do it for real once we get into the, well, probably not off-season program, training camp. And perhaps all those good vibes will build up his confidence and get him back to playing the way that he did play a couple of years ago with Frank Reich.
Not exactly good vibes on Philadelphia radio. The Carson Wentz trade did not exactly net the first-round haul the Lions got for Matthew Stafford. And on Philly radio, in the way that only Philly fans can express, upset about general manager Howie Roseman's handling of Wentz's tenure as an Eagle.
17 was great for all of us, and it was phenomenal, but it's time for us to move on. We have a bright future. After this coming year, we're going to have a lot of cap room. We have to get younger. We are going to get younger. And we should all be excited about the great picks, and it's about getting that garage cleaned out.
Why do you think his value's so low? It's because of Howie. He handled this whole situation just like Reed handled McNabb.
That's so not fair, Anthony.
I agree.
Anthony, that's so inaccurate.
I agree that it's because of Howie.
He's the one who drafted Jalen Hurts last year and created this.
Yeah.
He's the one who's basically leaking out. It has to be him or the Eagles leaking
Anthony,
out.
Anthony, the Eagles gave Carson opportunity after opportunity in 2020. They finally pulled the plug with 4 games to go because he was so bad.
This is all because of Howie Roseman and his mismanagement of this organization. He's driving this team into the ground.
So, Mike, no team will ever admit to fully being in rebuilding mode, but what does this move tell us about the Eagles and their future?
Just what you said, Omar. I mean, it is rebuilding mode. They picked up a likely first-round pick next year. And a 3 for a guy who finished the season on the bench, by the way. Like, the notion that they were going to get 2 first-round picks, even the Eagles knew that that was not going to happen. So a pretty good return for a guy who, for all intents and purposes, was a backup at the end of last year. And so now I'm looking at this team, and Howie Roseman had already said last year that they went for it in 17 and 18, and now they really had to stick with drafting to rebuild, restock the cupboard, and hang on to all of their picks. Well, now I think they're starting to compile picks, and I foresee a Zach Ertz trade for them at some point in the near future. That'll likely be another solid pick for them, and I think at some point you might refer to the Eagles the way that we've kind of talked about the Browns or the Jaguars in recent years when we've said, hey, they've got X number of picks over the next 2 years, because I really feel like that's the way that Howie Roseman is going and will continue to go, and will try to get as many of these picks as he possibly can to restock that cupboard and get this team moving in the next couple of years. Now, there's going to be some pain in the meantime, and Jalen Hurts, I'm sorry, because I don't know that this team is in the correct salary cap shape to really put pieces around you to compete right now, but I do think it is more of a long-term rebuild. And I think you're going to see a lot of picks in the Eagles' back pocket soon.
Yeah, it's one thing to have the picks, Mike. You got to hit on them now. So certainly a lot of pressure maintained on Howie Roseman. DeAngelo, conventional wisdom would tell us that they brought in Frank Reich's right-hand man, Nick Sirianni, to be the head coach of the Eagles to fix Carson Wentz. Now that Wentz isn't there anymore, is Sirianni still the right head coach for Jalen Hurts?
And you know what? Not really understanding and having Nick Sirianni ever call plays, I think no one really knows, right? I think the plan was for Nick Sirianni to, get with Carson Wentz and kind of, love him up and all of those great things. But with that now being off the table, I mean, Jalen Hurts is an incredible quarterback. He gives you so many different options. But just like Jeezy said, this Eagles team is not going to win a lot of games. There's not a lot of things you can put around Jalen Hurts at this particular time. And so, it's going to be growing pains. It's going to be going through the motions and trying to find a way to win football games. And I just don't know if this young football team can do it. You got to be a leader of men in that locker room. And, with Nick Sirianni in that introductory press conference, you got to, you got your script right there in front of you, and just the way he was fumbling and stumbling all over it, he just didn't inspire confidence in me. And I'm not going to be playing for the Philadelphia Eagles, and so it really doesn't matter how I feel, but he has to lead those guys in the locker room. You either can lead those guys with X's and O's and showing them how smart you are, or you can lead them just by being a powerful person in that meeting room and a voice that those guys can lean on. And so we'll figure out what kind of coach Nick Sirianni decides to be.
Eagles 4-11-1 in 2020. Certainly a lot of road ahead for them to improve upon. I guess the saving grace in the NFC East, guys, the winner of that division was 7-9 last season.
Yeah.
It's going to be an unprecedented Brady did from 2016 to 2018. Easier said than done, Mike. How do they do it?
They have to fix that protection, and I'm talking about the tackles, and they were exposed when they had to lean on their backup tackles there, and the way that Tampa Bay was able to exploit that in the Super Bowl. So now you're looking at Eric Fisher with an Achilles injury, crossing the age of 30, heading into the last year of his deal. And then you've got Mitchell Schwartz on the other side, who had a debilitating back issue. Never seemed like he was even close to coming back this past season. So could they possibly be moving on from both of their tackles? Those are two big question marks there for this Kansas City team. Now, the good news is Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, the guard, is coming back, as well as Lucas Niang. Both of those guys opted out. Niang, a third-round pick last year, the tackle. So we haven't seen him yet. Haven't seen what he's capable of doing, but they thought enough of him to draft him in the third round. So maybe he steps into a starting role and is a pleasant surprise. But this is definitely something that Kansas City needs to address before they head into the 21 season.
Yeah, Jeezy, you're absolutely right. You think about Patrick Mahomes, man. Even in that Super Bowl, playing with backup tackles, he still gave you a chance to win. So you ask me, what do they need? You know, it's protecting Patrick Mahomes, but you know that you have firepower on this offense. If Patrick Mahomes can stay upright, even when he was under duress in the Super Bowl, he still gave his guys an opportunity to make plays. They just didn't come down with those catches. So I want to see this defense get elevated a little bit more. You talk about Kansas City's defense. You know, when you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes and you playing with this explosive offense, you're going to have teams wanting to throw the football all the time on you because they're going to be coming back a lot of the times because Kansas City is going to jump out on them. But I love to see more secondary players. Bashard Breeland was probably their top corner last year. He's probably going to be gone in free agency. They got two young corners, L'Jarius Sneed, Travarius Ward. They're really good players, but you got to add more depth to that. You got to just keep bringing more young DBs into that Kansas City secondary because to me, that's the only thing that's going to hold these guys back. You know what you're going to get with that offense. Explosive and points.
Yeah, Tyrann Mathieu certainly making game-changing plays time after time again, saving that secondary there for the Chiefs. You have to go back all the way to the 90s to get a non-Patriots team with the Bills that lost a Super Bowl and then returned to the Super Bowl the following season. Headlines, Mike, we've talked about the Eagles appearing like they're heading down that rebuilding mode. Who else is joining Carson Wentz by leaving town?
It'll be Deshaun Jackson, and he was informed today that he will be released. Now, he had $9 million coming to him this upcoming season. It was non-guaranteed money. There was no way he was going to play for that. So the only question was, would he play for a lower number in Philadelphia? The answer, no. He will be headed elsewhere, as he announced on Instagram, and only played 8 games in the last 2 seasons. But when he did play, he still had that speed, and he still made some plays for the Eagles. So he is 34. He has been banged up, but I do expect interest on the open market for Deshaun Jackson, though it'll be at a much lower number than he was slated to make with the Eagles this upcoming season.
Yeah, still has some juice, maybe in spurts, Deshaun Jackson does. Mike, you, Ian, Tom, with the salary cap restrictions expected for 2021, have been telling us for months now that there's going to be a long list of veterans in that free agent market upcoming. Who's joining that list today?
Yeah, Ian, Tom, never heard of those guys. They've been on vacation all week while I've been handling things, so don't worry about them. The Packers today releasing offensive tackle Ricky Wagner, as well as linebacker Christian Kirksey with 77 tackles and a decent contributor for them this season. But Green Bay's having to make some tough decisions here as they work their way back under the salary cap. One of the teams that has been pushing some salary stuff into the future, and now they've got to deal with it because the cap is dropping at least, or up to, $20 million this upcoming season. Meanwhile, in Carolina, Trey Boston, their safety, he was released today. This is after they released K'Wan Short, also a couple other players. Now, Carolina's got some room, and they're creating some room in the second year of Matt Rule's tenure, so they could be very active in the free agent market with Scott Fitterer, their new GM, going out and signing some pieces for Rule to put in place.
Shaq Thompson, the only starter left from that Panthers Super Bowl team a few years ago, left after that Trey Boston move. And recapping the major storyline for anyone that missed it, the Eagles sending Carson Wentz to Indy for a third-round pick in 2021 and a conditional second-rounder in 2022. So, Mike, fill us in on what those conditions are.
Yes, well, if Carson Wentz plays 75% of the snaps this upcoming season, or 70%, and the Colts make the playoffs, which, if he stays healthy, I don't see how he doesn't hit that. That second-round pick in 22 turns into a first-round pick for the Eagles. And the Colts saying, hey, if we're right about Wentz, we're going to be in the playoffs because we feel good about our team. So that's going to be a late first-round pick. And if we're wrong, we'll probably pull the plug midway through the season, and we won't have had to touch any of our first-round picks in this trade. Meanwhile, the Eagles saying, hey, we're getting a 1 and a 3 for a guy who finished the season as a backup. So, you know what? Not a bad return. And then this just now from Carson Wentz on Instagram, his goodbye to Philadelphia, in which he names Doug Peterson, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, and his teammates, the city, everyone else. I know it's a little small there. Go check it out on Instagram and zoom in, use your fingers there on your phone to zoom in and check it all out. But Wentz, who had been silent on all of social media, mostly silent, since he was benched, finally says his goodbyes to Philadelphia. It'll be interesting to see what he says when he finally talks to the media. When he's asked questions, I'm sure he won't go too far into the past with regard to what he says and what led to his exit from Philadelphia.
And we don't expect to see that anytime soon, with the trade not becoming official until the start of the league year. So Wentz leaves the Eagles after a 4-11-1 season, the bottom of the NFC East. He now joins a Colts team that tied for the best record in the AFC South, although the Titans won the division with a tiebreaker. So let's bring back now D. Hall. At least one team has gone from worst to first in the division in 16 of the last 18 seasons. So D. Hall, are the Eagles the most likely candidate to do so in 2021?
Heck no, they not.
That laugh tells us all, D. Hall.
If I had to pick one, I know, it tells us all. If I had to pick one team, I'm gonna have to lean into the 49ers. And I think about the possibility of bringing a guy like Deshaun Watson. I've spent time around Kyle Shanahan, and just one of the smartest offensive football coaches I've ever been around. And I got to thinking about, man, what kind of quarterbacks has Kyle really had? Because he watches some of his proteges and Matt LaFleur work with Aaron Rodgers. He sees Sean McVay go and get Matthew Stafford. And he's had Matt Schaub, Donovan McNabb, Rex Grossman, Brian Hoyer, Matt Ryan. We know he had the MVP caliber season in the Super Bowl. Brian Hoyer again, C.J. Beathard, Jimmy Garoppolo. And so if you could get that guy, Deshaun Watson, on his wish list, look, I'm calling John Lynch for him. Kyle Shanahan needs an elite quarterback. If you give him an elite quarterback, you will be back in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, got to the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. Gil Brandt writing a piece today on this topic on NFL.com, and he picked the 49ers as well. So that's 2 votes for San Francisco. Mike, who are you taking?
I'm going nobody. I can see roadblocks everywhere. Part of me wanted to say the Jets, because, I really don't feel like the Jets are that far away from jumping into contention. But I just can't do it. I mean, I can't have the Jets jumping over the Bills. The Bills are looking too strong right now. So there's roadblocks across the NFL. But watch out for those Cincinnati Bengals, okay? Joe Burrow, there's a lot of confidence. He's going to be back week 1. Pittsburgh with this Ben Roethlisberger situation and the way that they finished the season, not feeling a whole lot of love there. Baltimore, let's continue to see if Lamar Jackson can win with that style of football there. I still got questions about that, and so do folks around the league. Cleveland's strong, though. So, there are roadblocks for the Bengals. That's why I'm going nobody. But they might be better this upcoming season than people think.
And there were a couple that went in the opposite direction this season. Both the Eagles and 49ers finishing first in 2019 and then last in 2020. So it can go the other way, too. Well, back in 1996, the Ravens were looking to start fresh in Baltimore after a tumultuous history in Cleveland, and would soon use their first ever pick to draft future Hall of Famer Jonathan Ogden out of UCLA. This week on Total Access, the Locker Room podcast, former GM and Executive of the Year Scott Pioli stops by to tell Michael Robinson and Brian Billick about the story behind that pick. Here's a sneak peek.
This week on Total Access, the Locker Room.
We had pick number 4, and it looked like the person that was most likely for us to have a shot at that we wanted was Jonathan Ogden. And when Ozzie mentioned that he was interested in, and it looked like we were looking at an offensive tackle, Art was kind of taken back. He's like, Ozzie, I had to move this team to Baltimore because, we got to sell.
Detroit, now Carson Wentz heads to the Colts, and we're not done yet. Let's go around the league for an update on the quarterback moves that are still on the horizon, starting with Mike Giardi and the Patriots.
Is there a case to bring Cam Newton back as the New England Patriots quarterback? According to some in the building and some players, yes, there is. Of course, not getting signed until June really hampered Newton's ability to learn and process that offense. And let's face it, wasn't surrounded with a whole bunch of weapons, especially after Julian Edelman went down with a knee injury fairly early on in the season. But if Newton isn't the guy to come back, Jimmy Garoppolo would be the ideal target, assuming San Francisco lets him go or allows him to be pride-free. Garoppolo knows the system here in New England and gets along great with offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick. One other name you want to mention? Vegas Raiders backup Marcus Mariota. Now to Stacey Dales.
Mike, with plenty of buzz recently surrounding Carson Wentz, who's now headed to Indy, it simply never made sense for the Chicago Bears. And to reiterate, there was never an offer on the table. The Bears are operating over the cap currently. They're in the red, and they have plenty of needs to address across the board. And while they do need a quarterback, given that Nick Foles is the only signal caller currently under contract, they also need to address their offensive line and receiver positions especially. And as they continue to look at all options at quarterback, I look for them to be patient heading into free agency, especially when it comes to potential cap casualties around the league, while also weighing, of course, all options in another critical draft for Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. Right now, let's go to James Palmer.
Well, thanks, Stacey. Even though there are several teams, to my understanding, interested in Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson, he is still not being made available for trade by the organization. Nothing has changed since last Friday when owner Cal McNair told several media outlets that Deshaun Watson is a Texan and Deshaun Watson is going to remain a Texan, even though the two sides still are not communicating. As of right now, the expectation is that this is going to carry over into mandatory minicamp, and that is when fines would start to be given to quarterback Deshaun Watson if he doesn't show up, and that is what many people believe is going to happen. So as of right now, Omar, the staring contest between the Texans and their quarterback Deshaun Watson continues.
I see you. Thank you, James. Mike Garafolo, you sensed this Wentz trade was imminent leading up to the agreement. So putting you on the spot here, where do we go from here? Who's next to move on that quarterback carousel?
This Mike G agrees with the Mike G that we just heard, Mike Giardi, but the back end of it, when he talked about Marcus Mariota, because I'll keep Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco for now, which means Mariota is a candidate in New England, as well as a few other places. Matter of fact, he was a fallback option in Indianapolis should the Carson Wentz trade not have happened. So there is interest in Mariota, who had a little bit of playing time last season, just enough to show people, hey, remember, this was a guy who went second overall in the draft. I think Mariota could be on the move because Derek Carr is staying put.
Yeah, Jeezy, I like that Mariota, and just think about the way the league is going with the mobile quarterback. So you're right on that. For me, it's Dak Prescott. It's the layup. Come on, Dallas. What are you thinking about? Dak has to be the next guy to go ahead and get locked up, secure his future there. Even if it's not for a long-term deal, Dak, it's all right. I've seen Kirk Cousins read the same book, man. Get franchised again, and then walk and hit the free agency market, brother. Don't worry about it.
Third straight year, Dak Prescott and his contract status with the Cowboys has been front and center. Time now for the Next Gen Stats powered by AWS as we focus on Dak's downfield passing ability. In 2020, before his injury, Dak was elite in terms of passes that traveled 10 or more yards through the air. Top 2 in completion percentage, touchdown to interception ratio, and passer rating among qualified quarterbacks. We'll see how the legend of Dak Prescott grows after he hopefully returns to full form and healthy in 2021. A legend in his own right. Doug Williams, the first black quarterback to start and win a Super Bowl, shares his thoughts of the importance of another legend, Tony Dungy, the first black head coach to win a Super Bowl, and how breaking those barriers opened the doors for many others. Network senior producer of Cause Initiatives and game changer filmmaker Anthony Smith join us with the behind-the-scenes look here on NFL Total Access. Anthony, congratulations. Recent Emmy Award winner for your NFL 100. How's it going?
It's going well, Omar. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to see you in person. I know we've talked and text, but it's always great to see you in person. The first impression I got watching about a half an hour of Game Changer a little earlier today was its impact on me, the impact I think we all hope it'll have on the audience. What was your inspiration for bringing this project together?
Well, I mean, I think that this started in many ways, not this past season, but the season before that, with Lamar Jackson having the season that he had, following the season that Patrick Mahomes had the previous year, and with Kyler Murray coming out as the #1 overall draft pick. There was a lot of talk around just black quarterbacks and the fact that, you know, when many of us were growing up, that wasn't the case. And all of a sudden, there was this influx of talent at the quarterback position from the African-American community. And I think that that's where the project first started to bubble up, and where I really started to think about a way to tell this particular story.
And Patrick Claiborne, one of our buddies, is the narrator there. You also had some huge names, Reverend Al Sharpton, Anthony Anderson, Snoop Dogg. What were the impressions of some of those interviews that you did from the guys that were outside the world of football?
Well, I think, in many ways, and a lot of the people that I interviewed about this, whether, they were, politicians or celebrities, or, quarterbacks, the quarterbacks themselves, everybody understands the responsibility, but also the stature that the black quarterback holds within the black community. I believe it was Al Sharpton who said, and I don't even think this made the cut, but he said that when you think about leadership, the quarterback position in many ways is one of the most high-profile leaders in the country, regardless of race, and especially so in the black community. So I think that all of the people that we spoke with for this particular story realized that, and they were more than willing to share their insights and their stories and just their recollections of growing up and taking us through the journey of the black quarterback.
Yeah, what was their first reaction when you approached some of these high-profile people about this project that you were doing?
Well, look, I mean, there's a reason that the NFL is the #1 sport in America. I mean, people love football, and whether you're a celebrity or not, or you and myself, or or other athletes, people love football, and people love talking about football. So it wasn't hard at all to get some of the names that we got to speak on the project to talk about the quarterbacks.
And you also had Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson playing a prominent role here. And
yes.
One of the things I think I noticed about the piece is maybe 30, 40 years ago, when a black quarterback was asked about his role, he would say, maybe I'm just a quarterback who happens to be black. Whereas now I think Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, they're openly embracing their role in society. Did you notice any of that in doing this piece?
I think so. I mean, I think that also, obviously, and some might ask, why are we even telling the story? Why is the story a story that even needs to be told today? And I think in many ways it's a celebration. We talk about progress, and the fact that we are here at this particular point in our history, despite everything else that's going on, and the fact that we know that we still have a long way to go, this is a sign of progress. It's a sign of progress within the NFL, within sports, but it's also a reflection of society. And like I said, we do have a ways to go in some ways, but the fact that there are 10 black quarterbacks starting in the National Football League, and that doesn't even count Jalen Hurts, who started later on in the season, that's a sign of progress. And I'm an optimist by nature, and I wanted to tell that story because it's a reflection of the progress that we have made as a country and as a sport over the course of the last 40, 50 years.
Anthony Smith, this was an awesome piece. I can't wait to see it in full, which you can catch Sunday night right here.
Richard Sherman, touchdown!
The quarterbacks and wide receivers going to get most of the headlines, but don't sleep on this class of free agent defensive backs. A few notable names that may soon have new homes, including Patrick Peterson, who Cardinals GM Steve Keim says he has spoken to recently about a possible return. There's Richard Sherman, who's also been openly talking about needing a new home in 2021. So as we bring back in Mike Garafolo and our resident DB, this is like a game show, DeAngelo. Let's pick a couple of these big names and put them with a perfect new home. Let's start with Patrick Peterson. Where do you see him fitting in next season?
Well, I think, the cornerback position sometimes get undervalued when you play for a bad team. So I want to send Pat P to the Indianapolis Colts with Matt Eberflus. I just think that zone defense, when you're a primarily shut-down corner in this league for a long time, at some point those wheels go away. Pat P can't quite run like he used to, but just a very smart football player, and he can still go out there and make plays. So I'd love to see him in a little bit more of a zone type of defense, and I think Matt Eberflus in Indianapolis will provide that type of defense for him.
You know who plays zone? The Jets, Robert Saleh. He had Richard Sherman the last couple of years, and you get to that point of your career where maybe your skills aren't as sharp as they used to be, but your mind is. Patrick Peterson, the Jets need cornerbacks. He's a big personality. It's a big market. I think it's a great fit.
Xavier Rhodes had a resurgent season in Indy last year. Maybe Patrick Peterson can do the same there, DeAngelo. How about one of the more underrated players in the NFL, Anthony Harris, one of the co-leaders in interceptions a couple years ago? Where would you like to see him play in 2021?
Well, you heard Jeezy mention the Jets, man. I think the Jets got enough money. They could actually get Pat Pete and go grab a safety to replace Jamal Adams. I would love to see Anthony Harris in New York playing in that